Hi friends, we're going to shoot this video a little differently. I will stay largely off camera, but I wanted to take the time to compare two different swords. We're going to start by reviewing a sword that has been kind of long overdue. This is a Ronin Katana, as recommended by Matthew Jensen. Quick shout out to my one of my favorite reviewers, Matthew. He's recommended this sword for a long time. It's one of Ronin Katana's kind of budget line. They currently retail for $139 on their website. This one is just listed as Samurai Sword Clay Tempered Katana Model number 9. So they have a whole bunch of these swords that are basically around $140. They have the same basic blade shape, and they just have slightly different Koshirae, so different fittings in the end. So number 9 spoke to me, I guess, because it was green, matching kind of my green mat down there. So it's a little gaudy for some folks' standards, but this is what spoke to me in the moment. Let's go over it real fast. I've been working with this for a while now. We've seen it pop up in a couple of my penetration videos. I'll try and throw some footage of me cutting with it. It cuts quite nicely. Considering that this is really an entry price level for a functional sword. No problem at all. Big, thick bamboo. Try one more. Oh! Again, very clean cut. And no sign of damage on the blade. Not the first one. Still no damage on the blade. I'll try again with a little bit more conviction. Blade still straight as an arrow. Very nicely done. Yep. Blade is still straight as an arrow. With no signs of damage on it. Stood up quite nicely. So far, it has held up quite well, despite me not quite abusing it, but certainly putting it through its paces. The itamaki here, the cotton ito, has not deformed. It has remained rather tight. The diamonds here are not perfectly regular, but they hold together well. I intentionally have not altered the Samegawa just for the occasion that I would make a review video. So you can see that when it was sent to me, the Makugi pins, they had their holes drilled and they just drilled straight through the ray skin. And so as a result, you have these like little bits of leftover that need to be trimmed. So that's more of a cosmetic thing than anything else. I've used the sword plenty, and they don't really protrude enough that it's going to be an issue when you're holding it. It's just something that would be kind of nice to tidy up with it. It does have two different Makugi pins, as is the style with most Chinese production katana. It's not usually seen on Japanese uchikatana. It features one Manuki down on this side and one up there, so two, not exactly typical, but they're they add a little flair to it, and it doesn't really interfere with the function of the sword. The Suba is rather nice. I appreciate the size of it. It's big, and it has a kind of, here, let's get it a little bit closer, kind of nice little scroll that's going on. So far, it hasn't been damaged despite any of my playing with it. It hasn't rubbed off, so presumably it's just a kind of brassy Suba that has some sort of a coating on it. I'm not exactly sure what they've used to seal it or blue the final surface on it. You can see that there's a seppa underneath there as well. I'll open up the sai in a second. The similarly the fuchi. Similarly, the fuchi is very close fitting. It fits the ska perfectly well. It doesn't have any movement or wiggle, and the Koshirae is matching and in a good position and doesn't show any sign of movement. So that's all nice and tight and good. There's one very minor mark where it was hammered before it was gone through the final coloration or stain right there, but I can let that slide, especially for this price point. So on the whole, very handsome fittings here. Here we'll open up the blade. The saya is lacquered black and very even. Has basically no imperfections. It's got some of my little finger marks on it. Sageo is made of the same material, presumably cotton, just like the itomaki. The shitodome seem to be in good standing and don't seem to run the risk of popping out. I haven't tried to unwrap anything, but all in all, it survived all of my little banging around and playing with it, going in and out of my obi and bumping into wakizashi once or twice. So on the whole, this remains in pretty good shape. You can see on the mouth, I have a little bit of residue here, which I think I may have cleaned off just a little bit of the initial after it came to me. And so this is the only complaint that I have, because even though it fits the blade rather nicely, there's only a minor bit of wobble. It did have some of this kind of waxy residue, which seemed to be inside of the scabbard. Let me see if any comes out. None seems to come out now, but the first couple of times we opened and closed the scabbard, I ended up with waxy residue both on the habaki and on the blade itself. So that was something to keep in mind. It was not quite dirty, but perhaps a protective measure for the inside of the saya or the blade itself, and it just required a little bit of cleaning. Coming back to the blade, the habaki is some type of brassy bronze. It's perfectly serviceable, although plain. It has taken a little bit of discoloration from where it's making contact with the saya. It's the same material or same color as the seppa, but you can see it's a slightly different yellow than the suba is. It fits the blade proper pretty well. It has a notch cut out for the mune here on the back, but not on the ha side, not on the actual blade side. You can see it's got a pretty handsome bohi sitting on there, and although not the brightest there is, let's see if I can get to focus. Although not the brightest, we do have a hamon, which is showing down the length of the blade. The blade itself is, as you would hope, quite sharp. Here, let me turn it around so we can get to the business end. The blade remains sharp the whole way through. The bohi terminates in a kind of just shallow end, which you don't see that much historically, but it's okay as far as reproductions go. It does have a nice little geometric yokote there at the end to start the Kissaki. Kissaki is medium sized, so it's a kind of chu Kissaki. It's not super long, it's not short like a Kissaki. So I'd say that that's pretty typical on modern reproduction katana. And so far I haven't managed to damage that boshi there, the end. Now keep in mind, as you can see, I've been using it for all sorts of funny things, using it for penetration testing and thrusting and the like. And even though it comes to a pretty fine tip, let's see if I can roll it all the way over. Comes to a pretty fine tip. So far I have not managed to cause any damage to the blade. So it remains, even with it being a differentially hardened blade, it remains pretty tough, I'd say, on the whole. It has a medium amount of sori. If we put it down for a second, let's see if I can get the whole thing in camera. So, measuring the blade really fast. The Nagasa is right at 70 centimeters, so it's 27.5-inch blade. Total length is the total length is 102 centimeters or 40 inches for the length of the entire blade. Previously, I'd measured the sori on this as being approximately 2 centimeters deep. You can see it's pretty uniform. It's got it might straighten out very little towards the it might straighten out a little bit towards the monouchi over here during the cutting portion of it, but otherwise the curve is pretty uniform along the length of the blade, so the sori is considered kind of neutral. So I would probably call this tori sori, but admittedly, I'm going through all these terms. I should mention up front that I am not an expert on Japanese swords by any means. I will defer to all of my friends in the Nihonto collecting community to correct anything that I have said at any point along this video, who are obviously a lot more knowledgeable than me and spend all of their time studying the intricacies and nuances of these wonderful swords. On the whole, this remains a very fun sword and a lot of value for the price point. It's functional, it's very maneuverable, the edge remains very good, and the envy of what the European market has to offer for any sort of sword in this price. To try and find a functional sword below $200 is almost impossible. To try and find a functional sword with an edge, and we can even test it right now. Let's see if I have anything here. I'll try and test this on camera. We'll see if it still cuts after all my abuse. And you can see it still cuts without any difficulty at all. So the European market wishes that it was able to produce swords like this right now at this price point. And it's just the laws of supply and demand. Right now, katana still remain the hottest sword in town. And as a result, everyone is making them. Now, that doesn't mean that every katana out there is great. Many of them are terrible. Many of them are worthless, and you could be paying way too much money for not a lot of sword, which is part of the reason that a channel like Matthew Jensen, Kyle Smith, my good buddy Kane Shen they're also good because they can help separate fact from fiction and show you where your money is better spent if your interest is in finding an actual functional sword, and that can be had for an inexpensive amount. Or if you just want something that looks pretty and looks like an anime sword, you can get that too. You can spend a lot of money and get something that's just nice to hang on the wall, but will not be able to do tamashigiri, will not be able to cut targets in your backyard. So, at the end of the day, I can wholeheartedly endorse this Ronin Katana number 9 for $140 if you have any interest in Japanese swordsmanship, Japanese arts. It's very difficult to beat this current budget line of swords from Ronin Katana. There are probably rooms for improvement. As I mentioned, there's a little bit of tidying up that can be done in some of the Koshirae here. Nothing of that impacts my user experience. There's almost no rattle in the blade at all. In the saya, that's a quality that many Japanese users value quite a bit. This again remains one of perhaps a couple noteworthy contenders at this price point for this style of sword. Now I would like to do something completely unfair to the Ronin Katana and compare that $100 sword to a sword that's many thousands of dollars. This is an antique katana. This is a 14th century blade, and I'm calling it a katana because it's currently in katana Koshirae, katana mountings. But given that the blade itself is from the Nanbokucho period, it probably was originally a tachi blade. This blade belongs to my good friend Chris in Germany, and we'll be going to visit him very shortly, but I'm having the opportunity to look at it before he gets it. Let's just take a quick look. So unlike the Ronin Katana, already you can see that it's exhibiting quite a bit more curvature, and the curvature is centered here in the lower part of the blade, so koshi-sori. It continues in through the ska, so the handle itself, the suka, is curved along the same shape as the rest of the sword. It has a different style of kashira. These are ones that you see in older style blades from the Muromachi period. And if I can get it close, you'll be able to see the spectacular work on the bronze metal, the brassy bronze metal. Let's see if I can get it to focus for us. That's about as close as I can get it. So all of this detail is very difficult to find anything of this caliber in modern reproduction swords. The type of craftsmanship that's required to do something like this is just not available, and certainly not available in most mass production swords. So the Ita wrap is in very good condition. You can see the ray skin peeking out underneath. This is a little button manuki that they have in here. I haven't seen one like that, but this is showing presumably the clan crescent. We'll see that motif repeating. I just have one little makugi sticking in there. And we'll see the same level of detail on the fuchi here. I had to put this sword together, and the seppa that came with it are designed to be able to accommodate this little koshikatana, this little side blade. Let's see if I can pull it out. It slides out very easily, and it has a cute little saw blade on it. A nice little utility knife. Oh, I almost neglected to show that we see this repeated pattern of the circle with the bars across it. Again, forgive me for not having done the research of knowing the crest and the appropriate clan history of that symbol. But the first time I put this sword together, I had the seppa on the incorrect way, and I couldn't actually put the sword into the saya because this little Koshikatana didn't have enough space to pass. So again, you can see the integrated. You can see the integrated Kogatana. And I'm not sure exactly what material the saya is made of. It's not the typical lacquered wood. I'd have to ask. I don't want to conjecture as to what it is. And this one does have a shape. I don't know if this shape would still be considered a kojiri. Someone will have to tell me in the comments if it is. But once again, you can see the repeated pattern of the circle with the bars on it. And again, the work, the craftsmanship is just spectacular and not something that we have the opportunity to see on reproduction swords at all. The saya out of the way. Let's see if I can get it to focus on one. All right. So the Habaki has this nice little kind of scored pattern. And to me, it does not look like it is gold. It does just look like it's a copper alloy Habaki. And of course, everyone wants to see the blade. My lighting is going to make this tricky, but it is still in really nice polish. And I'm trying to capture it, but the hamon seems to run through the end, suggesting that perhaps it has been shortened at the Kissaki. Let's see if we can see it on the other side a little bit better. Yeah, I think you can see where the hamon goes straight rather than coming up to meet at the very tip. It kind of runs through the middle of the belly. You can see the hamon turning into a dark line and running through the boshi instead of coming up through the tip. So I'm really fortunate to be able to handle a sword like this. I have handled other Nihonto before, usually not a daito, usually not a long sword like this. This one does have the signature on the katana side, so it's a katana. However, given that it's a 14th century blade, and blades didn't really start being made as uchikatana until really the later end of the Muromachi period is when they really start to take off. It's likely that this was originally a tachi style blade meant to be worn slung down from the waist in a cavalry style for a cavalry style draw, and then it later had the Koshirae for a katana mounted to it, and has been shortened either both from the tip and from the tang. So the Sugaha style hamon and the deep curve are all indicative of its earlier Nanbokucho period style of war sword. So it's very interesting to see a sword from that period. It weighs, even though it's very slightly shorter than the Ronin katana. It's with only within 30 or so grams of it in weight. It handles very easily. It has a lot of authority and presence in the blade. It feels ready to make powerful cuts, and this degree of curvature makes it very easy to tell which direction the blade is pointing at any given moment. On the whole, it's really interesting to hold. I didn't want to play with it too much. I'm obviously not putting it through its paces the way I would an actual reproduction sword, because this is an antique with a lot of history behind it. We want to take very good care of it. But just because I had the opportunity to have two katana from almost, almost 700 years apart, I thought it was a good opportunity to have them side by side and to look at them and see how they were similar and how they were different. On the whole, I think that the reproduction Japanese sword market is doing a very, very good job. For comparably little money, you're able to get swords which are surprisingly faithful to the antique counterparts. Many other communities of sword reproductions have a lot bigger of a gap to fill up, either because of lack of experience or inattention to detail or what have you, and we just have more work to be done. But right now, things are looking good. If you're into Japanese swords, that's the place to be. You have potentially a lot of value for your dollar if you'd like to go into that area of reproduction. Anyway, that's all that we have to discuss for right now. Thank you so much for visiting, and we'll see you next time.